It's a pleasure to welcome our next speaker, Donal Lumm from Lexington, Kentucky. I know Donnie fairly well. He's a well-regarded geologist and professional in his field, also a certified minerals appraiser with the IIMA. Let's give a warm welcome to Donnie.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first at-bat at SME annual meeting. I've been a member for 30 years, so I finally was encouraged to come and give a little chat about mineral appraisals as far as the work with the turnkey between the geological report and that of the mineral appraiser. So without further ado, I'll get started on this. Thank you. Basic outline is shown up here. I'll be presenting an internal checklist for all appraisers who probably already have one already for reviewing and using a third-party reserve evaluation report. We'll discuss examples of detecting unverifiable geologic data and invalid assumptions used to derive these reserve estimates. And of course, what happens often is how to avoid getting bogged down in the nitty-gritties of the reserve estimate report. Converting a reserve estimate as a report written that is sent to you by a third party is never easy as a turnkey procedure to get to your valuation. So in bold red, I've got the appraiser must first sit down, carefully review, identify the following critical elements in a geologically based reserve report. What are the qualifications or experience of the report preparer? Often there's little bio information in the report. It may or may not state that the person producing the report is a PG or professional geologist, or hopefully better, a certified professional geologist. You may not know the person, you may not have heard him, but you've got to gauge what's going to be in the report that you're about to open, and it will unfold to you in the quality of the descriptions of the data and methodology of the report that you're going to review, extract, and examine. Then the date of the reserve report, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Very importantly, what's the purpose and scope of the reserve estimate? Often, it's never stated in the reserve report. It's often given to, in a consulting team, it's given to one or two people, and they never completely state why they are doing the report. It may be obvious to them, but they fail to mention the exact nature of why they are writing the report in the first place. Sometimes the valuation appraiser must ferret that out. Then you've got to understand that often, again, the report doesn't state the development stage of the property, nor does it give into very good detail the source and verifiability of the geologic data. And then finally, the methodology and assumptions are often quite poorly explained in the geological-based resource reserve evaluation report. So you have very little to go on. You may not know who wrote the report just by name only, so you've got to ferret this out and see where the report is going to lead you in producing a meaningful valuation report. The report and the valuation date, it should be completed. Your valuation should be completed within 1 year of the active producing, within 1 year of the report. If it's not, if you're given a report that's more than a year old, your intended user or reader, albeit a banker or someone who's going to be scrutinizing your valuation, may come up with questions like, well, what happened between the last 12 months? Is the property on the upswing? What operational changes have occurred, et cetera, et cetera. So you invite certain bad things that may be asked in that delay between the reserve report and that of your valuation. So beware of that. Another unfortunate incident is that your client will often produce a late telephone call and give you some what he believes to be is critical, important information that may not be in your reserve report. He may state that, gee, we are now producing 2 or 3 units instead of 1 or 2 units. We're now working on Saturdays. We've got a good production. They generally tell you the good news. They may not tell you the bad news. They may not be willing to tell you that, gee, we ran into a mud seam or a fault. That's the time when you see these things. If it's all good, it's probably too good to be true. You need to pick up the phone and call the company who produced the report or even the client. What's going on with the report in terms of the information and data that I'm seeing versus what's going on? What am I going to write to? And then the appraiser does not want to get into ad-libbing the report. That is, if he gets information, either positive or negative, he should request in writing by email from the client or the report producer about these specific conditions which have occurred since the report was produced and the time you're writing the valuation. He needs to cover his own behind and use that information either positively or negatively when he produces the report. Again, what is a report produced for? Again, the person, the geologist or mining engineer, is not often going to tell you why the report is produced. So this is something that the appraiser, the evaluator, should ask for. Going to the bottom, determine, is this report being produced because the property is in stress? Is there a pending sale? Is it going to be put on the block pending my completion of the valuation report? These are things that should be brought up forth and discussed and validated with emails so that the appraiser can use the most current information and not ad-lib it in the report, but have backup information. This is a very busy slide. I'm going to break it in half in the next 2 slides. What you see is the typical sequence of development of a coal property. In the upper half is the exploration and the mineral acquisition. All the things are progressing from the left side to the right side in a time element. In the bottom is the project value increases with the more information you have, and on the right, your data and your disclosure becomes more important. As I said, we're going to break this slide in half, looking at the first part. In the first part, we have exploration going on, mineral acquisition, surface and wheelage agreement, the development of the mine production, coal waste. All of these things are in the cradle-to-grave scenario of your producing coal property. The bottom is just showing you the project value increases with more and more information, and your knowledge base, data and disclosure goes on with more information and ancillary information gained to the right. The bottom half is your development of the coal property in terms of your data and disclosure. As I said, this part deals with the desktop study and what you can do with that. And then you go up in increasing levels of confidence or information in the scope of your project and your report. Source and verifiability of geologic data. The collection, analysis, and the judicial use of the borehole and coal quality data are crucial for deriving meaningful resource estimates. The borehole logs and the lab's analyses must include header information. The photographs of the coal cores and the pit excavations should include a scale or a tape ruler for reference. And then the non-coal partings must be properly identified and measured. We'll go through and look at some of these in detail. You've all seen this. This is the out of the reliability categories from Gordon Wood et al. In Circular 891 USGS, published 25, 30 years ago now. We all use and rely that. The maps you should pull out of the back of the report that you get should at least show you the confidence intervals, so that you, the evaluator, can look at and see the confidence of the 1/4 mile measured versus the inferred, and the indicated and the inferred. Good companies do this, and so it allows you, the evaluator, to make a very brief scan and see the quality of the mapping that was done behind. Now, be aware, in some parts of southeast Kentucky, a 1/4 mile will just about do it for some very thin, erratic, discontinuous seams. So this Gordon Wood et al. Model may not be applicable to some of the thin, ragged, discontinuous seams, so it may not always apply. Be aware as an appraiser of the strict sense use of this for some thin seam, erratic seam mining in eastern Kentucky and other parts of the country. Here's another view of the same. Again, this is just based on measurement from the outcrop. Nothing new or different here. It just shows the confidence intervals from the light green being a 1/4 mile, the measured, to the lime green, the indicated, and then the inferred and the tan. The data for the resource estimates, you like to have exclusively core logs. Yes, some companies do it on the cheap and do rotary and then go back and do e-logs. You do like to have core logs and good descriptions by a geologist or even a knowledgeable engineer. Gamma ray logs and neutron logs are also used in the industry and very valuable. You want to have a number of coal quality analysis, short procs. 1 or 2 data points isn't going to do it for a sizable property. You need to have a reasonable number of coal quality analyses to confirm and verify the coal quality on the subject. Digital MACE maps are required, property, topographic, satellite, coal outcrop, subcrop maps, permit mined out area, depletion maps, any oil and gas well location maps, wetland maps that are supplied are very helpful. You may not get it, you may not see it in the report, but if you're working in an area that is, if you're evaluating a coal prospect like this, and you know that it's a heavily drilled area, that it's also concomitant to use for gas production, as in East Kentucky, you may ask or request for a map of the location of the oil wells in the property. You're not out of bounds to ask for more information to help you understand, because commonly the consultant or whoever's producing the report has a strict billable hours limit. It is what it is, and they're going to get the report done. Cowboy the report as soon as they can and not go overboard, and you see a very limited amount of background information and examples and supporting information of the data and the methodology used for the data to get the report. It's often very short-changed, unfortunately. Then you analyze the borehole data. You would like and hope to see appendices as an evaluator, the information on the boreholes in the back. You don't always get it, but it would be fruitful for the report writer to include that. You want to see the borehole IDs, the lat long GPS, coal seam, particularly total seam, total coal. You want to see the other information, and it would behoove you to ask for a sample stratigraphic column or a log if it's not included. That is information that you should know and accept to verify the quality of the report. How is the non-coal interval being treated in the report? It should be treated because it's part of the overall package that you're using to qualify your reserve and resource appraisal. As I said, the confirmed inaccuracy may require that some data points that you see on the map should be disqualified. You should look for actually data points that say do not honor or DNH that shows you that the geologist or whoever was behind it was skeptical and used good common sense in using some data but rejecting other data. That shows you that they did a full interpretation of the data and just didn't throw everything in Carlson software and spit it out. Here's an example of a driller's log. I know it's hard to see. This example is from Vigo County, western Indiana. Again, it's hard to see. One thing you can see is that the thickness of almost all coal rock units and non-coal rock units end in 0. Whoever measured it was lazy on that day. They may not have been, it may have been a driller, whoever, who was very cold, it was tired, they were in a hurry. They rounded things to the nearest 0. Well, you know, in fact, that that's not reality. So when you get to the yellow lines, you see the coal is also ending in units of 0. What's the chance of that? Well, that's 8.3% out of 12 inches that it's going to be end up as 1 foot 0 inches. It may be all you have. You may have to use such data, but you will have to qualify that in your report that you had very inferior coal log interpretation of the data. Another thing to note, and it's hard to see, in the middle of it, it says coal and slate are combined in one litho unit. Well, is it coal or is it slate? How much is coal and how much is slate? You truly can't use that kind of data in a geologic report or evaluation because you can't verify what it is. So you may have to say do not honor for certain coal beds intervals of the unit. Good geologic reports include photos of the coal, not all, but some. And here's where the rubber meets the road. Is the report going to the detail to identify and describe the thickness of non-coal units? The index finger of that shown in the photo is pointing to some non-coal bone, which is coal that has clay or detrital material in it. Is this material properly identified and listed in thickness in the geologic report, in the coal thickness measurement? Well, it should be, because it is impurity and it is waste and it is mined, yes, but you got to consider that in the waste factor. So can the coal quality analysis be verified by a third party? During sampling the collector, he's got to identify each coal sample interval thickness, depth, or elevation on the chain of command. The reviewer of the lab analysis must verify the sample thickness and depth with a source core log or field location and a measurement. Here's an example of a topo map. The red holes, or the red dots at the bottom of it, were drilled on top of a small ridge or pinnacle. This is Bell County, Kentucky. Ridgetop mining. After a while, they decided, gee, we didn't get any coal quality measurements, so they went in later on, subsequently, and the blue dots represent bench trench samples that were taken after the drilling occurred. So it's hard to see, but the bench samples show the lat long and the identification of the location. but they don't include the surveyed elevation. Now, we go to the laboratory report for the bench sample that was taken after the drill hole. In the yellow, you see that the identification of the seam is very ambiguous. You see 15-inch top rider, third rider from bottom seam. Well, what's the bottom seam? What's the identification of the bottom seam? This happened to be drilled in the Hance sequence or zone in Bell County. There's 3 or 4 benches of the Hance, and so there's very little information. Doesn't tell you what the bottom seam is, doesn't tell you what elevation it is. So you got a real problem here. And then you go to the log to explain it, and you see the top rider at the top says 10 inches. Well, we just saw in the lab report it said 15 inches. And here on the line item of the log it says 10 inches. So you got a real problem here of verifying the measurement on the log with that of the coal quality lab analysis. You probably ought to reject the use of this particular thing, at least the geologists. The methodology is they got to conform to the USGS Circular 891. Mineable coal varies across all regions and even in different basins. You all know that. The appraiser should question the nature and extent of the disturbances of the coal beds if not explained, and they should ask for and request a pro forma sheet to understand the operations that are deemed to be marginal. Conclusions. The appraiser must sit down, carefully read and identify the shortcomings of the reserve, estimate, and report. Make a list. Call or contact the individual or the company to explain the shortcomings to you. Get written communications from them giving full explanations to your sets of questions. You've got to decide whether to address the shortcomings with the client or deal with in your valuation. If you don't deal with it up front, you're going to be left with a very meddlesome and a very troublesome outcome of your appraisal. If significant errors or methodology are observed, reading the report and between the time you do your valuation, you have the ability to step away from the valuation and reject the report or get some sort of updated report to help you. Thank you. I think I just finished on time. Thank you.
We have time for a quick question.
Very quick. You're AIPG certified, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In that bottom paragraph, what would you say then that if you, as an appraiser and also certified AIPG, if you did not say no to that job, but went ahead and did the job, do you then, as a professional geologist, do you have a liability, you think? What is your opinion?
I think you do, and here's why. Your reputation can be ruined in 10 seconds. Is your career worth it to make the job go through to please your supervisor? Yes, you're under stress, but I think an experienced professional, I mean, he may put several hours into this and decide, I just can't deal with this report. I think it's in his best interest to walk away. Now, what
if you do it, are you then, as a professional geologist on the AIPG, have you done something wrong?
If I do it, yes, I think I have done something wrong. I've done a disservice to my fellow appraisers and to the mining industry by going along with this shoddy report and just completing it for the sake of following instructions. I think you do have to have a legitimate integrity in doing this. That's what AIPG is. We're not out. Integrity is everything, and that's why you go through the channels of certification. Your integrity is essential to the organization. So, yeah, I would walk away from it. Thank you very much. I'll be available later on.